So I've recently done a free-to-play video on Oracle Think Tank. This is basically the same deck, it's just more built upon with the grade 3s that I mentioned in that video. Since that video, I did make another PG. And I did pull a SP Oracle, which was pretty cool. Here, let's just look at that. I really like his art, so damn, that's pretty. So the goal of this deck is kind of the same as the previous OTT deck of just using manipulation of the deck to give us advantage. Now that this deck plays CEO Amaterasu, we have a consistent way of doing this every turn without having to use rear guards to do this. Her ability, if you don't know, is that during your turn, if your hand has 2 or more cards, she is a 14k attacker. And then at the beginning of your turn, you soul charge 1, look at the top card of your deck, and then you can choose to put it on the bottom or keep it on top. She also has a Mega Blast of Soul Blast 6, Counter Blast 4, and then you get to draw 5 cards. I've never used this ability. I use the Counter Blast in this deck for other abilities, so I think it is not needed here. If you ever can get to it though, it is obviously just a free plus. Because the drive check is a very essential piece to the game, it means that a part of your turn is reliant on luck. With Amaterasu's ability of being able to check the top card, it kind of helps lower the luck of the game and puts that in our favor. We're going to use all the draw power in the deck that we have available to us to try to out-tempo our opponent. And then with that out-tempoing, we're going to then try to finish them with Silent Tom. Silent Tom is one of the most interesting units in the game. He is an 8k unit that can get past perfect guards. This can guarantee you if he attacks, unless your opponent hits a heal, you will win the game. Going to go over the deck very quickly because most of this has already been talked about. Sakuya is here just as a backup to CEO. She does have a cool ability of that when she's placed, you can bounce everything. So we can use that in tandem with units like Black Cat and Coco. We have the 4 Apollo. He is here as a draw power and to use our Counter Blast. We typically don't want to run him on our Vanguard now because CEO is a better Vanguard unit. But having him on rearguard is very powerful. It does give us 1 less interceptor, and we do need to have interceptors as often as possible. So when we place him is very important. And then the 4 Meteor Break Wizard is here just to guarantee us consistent attacks. I still love Battle Sister Mocha in here as the 11k attacker. She's great. I still do not like Maiden of Libra. She's only in here as a backup to Apollo. She does fill the slot of us needing a grade 2 on board every turn, but I feel like if I did have a 4th Tom, I would cut her down to 1. I only have the 1 Battle Sister Coca. She has the ability that when she is placed, you can look at the top card of your deck and then place it either on top or bottom. This allows us early game checking, so before we get to CEO, and then in case CEO's check gives us a non-trigger unit, and then we can use Coco to go 1 check deeper. If I had more of her, I think I would start cutting out Black Cat first. She is the on-place, both players draw a card. Luckbird is better in this deck than it is in the Sakuya deck because we do have soul charging every turn with CEO. I still only play 2 because it is a 5k booster, and that can give us some awkward numbers sometimes. Gemini is very essential in this deck because you need him to be boosting Silent Tom because it'll make your column a 16k attack column versus a 15k attack column. This is important so that Silent Tom can be the second attacker on a turn, which I'll talk about later. We play 9 draws in this deck to really emphasize the draw power. We need to get to our pieces consistently every game. We need to make sure that we get to Silent Tom, and we need to make sure that we get our PGs, all of them. If we can't get the majority of our PGs, then we won't be able to out-tempo our opponent in the late game. If you play crits in this deck, it does give you an easier time getting to the late game, but it does turn off Silent Tom. What I mean by that is if your opponent is at 4 damage, you swing him with your Vanguard, you check a crit, but then your opponent PGs that. Us then swinging with Silent Tom will still hit, but then they'll go back to only 5. When originally, if our Vanguard had hit, they take the damage, and then we swing in with Tom to be the finishing hit. With that in mind, I've seen some really cool deck recipes that place stand in them. This will allow the deck to have a way of dealing 2 damage on a turn that they could have only dealt 1. I am not playing stands just because I feel like getting to Tom and getting to our PGs is more essential than dealing 2 damage a turn. Maybe if I had more Coco to feel out a more aggressive play style, I would, but since I only have the one, I like the draw power more in this deck. Having Amaterasu out every turn, allowing us to check the top card, gives us knowledge on the lines of play we should do, whether we should be calling out Oracle or Maiden of Libra to draw the next card if we need it, like if it's a Silent Tom or a PG, or if we should be attacking with CEO Amaterasu first to get the trigger so then we can use that 5k power on a rear guard. What you'll want to do if you draw a Silent Tom early is to hold him in your hand. If you get into a second one, it's okay to call him and use him as an interceptor, but you want to make sure that you hold on to one just so then you will have a finisher late game, because you don't want to call him out too early, get him retired, and then not be able to use him late game. Also, if you're not playing against Kagero, feel free to lay a Gemini out very early. Just don't place a grade 3 in front of him, because then your opponent is less likely to retire it versus an interceptor where they have to get rid of it. Going up against the meta, sadly, you're going up against like a mirror match against OTT. Whoever gets to Silent Tom first is going to be the one who wins. It's going to be a tempo game unless your opponent's playing stands. So that means whichever player can get to that 5th damage quicker and then use Silent Tom as a finisher is going to be the one who wins. So I would just try to play the defensive game as soon as you can, just getting out the interceptors, and then try to deal any damage that you can early game. Going up against Kagero is where we're going to have the most trouble. They have a good draw game as well, so they can keep up with us on a stamina basis. So capitalizing on the turn that they use like a Dragonic Overlord on rearguard is where we're going to be able to turn a game around. Because let's say they do a board wipe with Dragonic Overlord attacking our front row. Well, now they have one less interceptor, so then we can guarantee us a second damage with either Sakuya or with Amaterasu. So you need to capitalize on those turns that you can deal those 2 damage. Going up against Novas, the multi-attacks can be very annoying. The defensive power of getting us our perfect guards as early as possible will help us get into the late game where we can out-tempo a Nova Grappler deck, but they can deal us quite a lot of damage in their early game. Going up against Royal Paladins, they have a really good grade 2 game, so they can out-tempo us on the board, especially with like a Blaster Blade being able to retire our units and then be able to deal us additional damage. We have a great advantage over them in the late game because they will likely have run out of Counterblast and run out of cards in their hand, because a lot of Royal Paladin decks cannot play a lot of draws because of Barkle. So having PGs in our hand will help us survive the turns that they swing in with a 2 crit, or turns that they can get past our interceptors with a Blaster Blade. My final thoughts for the deck is that having a 14k attacker that can help us know whatever we're going to be drawing next, and having a grade 2 that can get past perfect guards, this deck feels like crazy strong when the pieces are all there. That said, since we don't have any manipulation on the board, we can have a lot of trouble in the early game, making games really frustrating if you can't get a defensive trigger. I don't think this deck is on the same tier as like Kagero or like Nova Grappler even, but it feels like right below them, not like a whole tier below them. So I'd say it's more 1.5 than it is 2. So if you have a good set of Toms, I think that's where you can start building this deck. I don't think you need the CEOs to make this deck strong, but if you have CEOs and not Toms, I don't think I would try out this deck. It does have some pretty cool stuff having like the 5th heal in the deck, but with all the draw power, sometimes you end up drawing the heals too. So it's kind of feels like, I don't throw it's counterintuitive, but plays against itself in that vein. If I ever start pulling more Coco, I think I'll give Stance a try in this deck, and then I'll get back to you on that. I still haven't pulled any good triple rares for Royals, so I don't think that video will be coming out anytime soon. Same with Grand Blue. I haven't pulled a single Night Mist or Rune Shade, so hopefully I'll pull better on the later end of the event. I've been really enjoying making these videos. I hope you've been enjoying them. If there's any kind of videos you'd like to see that are not deck techs, let me know. If you want to see some weird pictures I've been making, I've been posting them on my Twitter and my Instagram. They will be linked in the description. I'm going to try something. I'm going to try to throw my hat right on the camera lens without breaking shit. Okay. 1, 2, 3.